Elena Romano thought her biggest worry was paying rent on time, until the night she witnessed a deadly fight in an alley and spoke 3 words in Sicilian that would change everything. The mysterious man with blood on his hands and ice in his eyes had been hunting for someone exactly like her, someone who could unlock secrets from the old country. But when Elena becomes the target of a ruthless mafia family demanding her dead brother's debts, she discovers that the most dangerous man in the city might be the only one who can save her and her silent 7-year-old nephew. As bullets fly and loyalties are tested, Elena must choose between the safety of a killer's protection and the innocence of the child she's sworn to guard. What she doesn't know is that her protector is harboring a devastating secret about his own lost family, one that will either destroy them all or forge an unbreakable bond forged in violence and redeemed by love. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story of survival, sacrifice, and second chances is about to prove that sometimes the most broken people create the strongest families. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hung in the air like a thick blanket. Elena Romano wiped down the same table for the 3rd time, her eyes constantly moving to the corner booth where 7-year-old Luca sat coloring. His small fingers gripped the red crayon so tight his knuckles were white. "Another coffee, hun?" Elena asked the trucker at table 6. He nodded without looking up from his phone. The diner felt different tonight. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Maybe it was the way that man in the baseball cap had been staring at her all evening. Or maybe it was just the bills piling up at home, making her jumpy. Luca looked up from his coloring book and caught her eye. He didn't speak. He hadn't said a word since his mama died 2 years ago, but his dark eyes said everything. He was tired. They both were. "Just a little longer, baby," Elena whispered to him as she passed his booth. "Then we'll go home." The bell above the door chimed. Elena's stomach dropped. The man in the baseball cap was back, and this time he wasn't alone. 2 other men followed him in, their heavy boots loud on the cracked linoleum floor. "We're closing soon," Elena called out, but her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "That's okay, sweetheart," the first man said. His smile made Elena's skin crawl. "We just need to have a little chat." Elena moved closer to Luca's booth. Her hand found his shoulder, and she felt him tense under her touch. "About what?" she asked. "Your brother owed some people money before he died," the man said. He sat down at the counter without being asked. "Funny thing is, debts don't die with people. They get passed down." Elena's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." The man's friends spread out, one by the door, one by the window. "Tony Romano." "Ring any bells? He was your brother, wasn't he?" Elena's hands started shaking. Tony had been dead for 3 years. She'd thought all his problems died with him. "I don't have any money," she said. "We barely have enough for rent." "That's not our problem," the man said. He looked at Luca, who had stopped coloring and was watching with wide, scared eyes. "Cute kid. Be a shame if something happened to him." The words hit Elena like a punch to the stomach. She stepped in front of Luca, blocking the man's view. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice stronger now. "He's just a little boy." "Then maybe his aunt should be more careful about paying what she owes." Elena's mind raced. She had maybe $200 in her bank account. These men wanted thousands, money she'd never seen, money Tony had borrowed and lost before she even knew Luca existed. "I need time," she said. "You've got a week," the man said, standing up. "After that, we start collecting other ways." The 3 men left as quickly as they'd come. Elena stood frozen until their car disappeared down the street. Then her legs gave out, and she sank into the booth next to Luca. His small hand found hers. His eyes were full of questions she couldn't answer. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, pulling him close. "Everything's going to be okay." But as they walked home through the dark streets, Elena felt eyes on them from every shadow. Nothing was okay. Nothing would be okay unless she found money she didn't have. The eviction notice was bright yellow and impossible to ignore. Elena stared at it, taped to her apartment door like a neon sign announcing her failure. 30 days, she read out loud, due to non-payment of rent. Luca pressed against her side, still wearing his pajamas. She'd hoped to get the mail and be back inside before he woke up, but 7-year-olds were early risers. Elena's hand shook as she unlocked their door. The apartment was small, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that doubled as Luca's play area. But it was theirs. Or it had been. "Go brush your teeth, baby," she told Luca. "I'll make breakfast." While he was in the bathroom, Elena grabbed her phone and started calling. First her boss at the diner, then her few remaining friends, then anyone who might loan her money. "Sorry, Elena. Things are tight right now. I wish I could help, but with my dad in the hospital. Maybe you should call social services. They could help with Luca." Elena hung up on that last one so fast she nearly threw the phone. No one was taking Luca. He'd lost his mother, his father before that, and his Uncle Tony. Elena was all he had left, and she was all he was going to get. Luca came out of the bathroom, his hair sticking up in all directions. Elena forced a smile and pulled him onto her lap. "What do you want for breakfast?" she asked. He pointed to the cereal box, then to her face. His finger traced the worry lines around her eyes. "I'm fine," she said, but they both knew she was lying. Luca had gotten good at reading her moods. He had to be. He couldn't ask questions out loud. Elena poured the last of the cereal into a bowl for him and made herself coffee with yesterday's grounds. While Luca ate, she stared at the yellow paper on their tiny kitchen table. 30 days. She needed first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit to get a new place. Even if she worked double shifts every day, she wouldn't make enough. And that was before those men came back for Tony's debt. Luca finished his cereal and climbed back onto her lap. He was small for 7, all big eyes and sharp elbows. Sometimes Elena forgot he was just a baby. He'd been through so much that he seemed older, more serious than other kids. "We'll figure it out," she told him, smoothing down his messy hair. "We always do." But for the first time since she'd taken him in, Elena wasn't sure that was true. The alley behind the diner smelled like garbage and broken dreams. Elena had just finished her shift and was walking to her car when she heard the first punch land. She froze, keys halfway to the lock. The sound came again, flesh hitting flesh, followed by a grunt of pain. Elena should have kept walking, should have gotten in her car and driven away. But something made her look around the dumpster. 2 men were fighting in the narrow space between buildings. One was tall and thin, all sharp edges and desperation. The other was shorter but built like a wall, broad shoulders, thick arms, moving with deadly precision. The thin man swung wild. The other man stepped aside like he was dancing, then hit back once, clean and hard. The thin man dropped like a stone. Elena gasped before she could stop herself. The winner turned toward the sound. Even in the dim light from the street, Elena could see his face clearly. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He was handsome in a dangerous way, like a knife with a pretty handle. Their eyes met across the alley. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Luca," she called softly. "Come here, baby." The little boy appeared from behind her car, where he'd been waiting while she worked. He took one look at the man and stepped closer to Elena. "It's okay," she told the boy in Sicilian, the language her grandmother had taught her. "We're just going home." The man's expression changed when he heard the words. His eyes sharpened, focusing on her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Elena grabbed Luca's hand and hurried toward her car. Behind them, she heard footsteps, but she didn't turn around. She got Luca buckled in and started the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. In her rearview mirror, she saw the man watching them drive away. He was still standing there when she turned the corner. Elena couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that man's face, the way he'd looked at her when she spoke Sicilian. Like he knew something she didn't. At 3 a.m, she gave up and made coffee. Luca was asleep in the bed they shared, curled up with the stuffed elephant his mother had given him. Elena sat at the kitchen table and tried to make sense of their situation. The rent was due in 30 days. The men who wanted Tony's money would be back in 6. She had one more shift at the diner before her boss decided whether to keep her on, and even if he did, it wouldn't be enough. Elena pulled out a piece of paper and started making lists. Money coming in, money going out, money she needed but didn't have. The numbers didn't add up. They never did. She was still sitting there when Luca woke up. He padded to the kitchen in his bare feet and climbed onto her lap without a word. "Bad dreams?" she asked. He nodded against her shoulder. "Me too, baby. Me too." By Thursday morning, Luca was burning up with fever. Elena felt his forehead and bit back a curse. They couldn't afford a doctor visit, but they couldn't afford to wait either. She called in sick to work and spent the day trying to bring his temperature down. Cold washcloths, children's medicine from the dollar store, all the tricks her grandmother had taught her. By evening, Luca was better but still pale and shaky. Elena couldn't afford to miss another day of work. She bundled Luca in his warmest clothes and brought him to the diner. "You can color at the corner booth," she told him, "just like always." But it wasn't like always. Luca was quiet even for him, and Elena kept checking on him every few minutes. She was so distracted that she almost dropped a plate of eggs. "You okay, hun?" asked Marge, the other waitress. "Fine," Elena lied, "just tired." The diner was busier than usual. Elena rushed between tables, trying to keep up. She was refilling coffee when she noticed the man at table 4. It was him, the man from the alley. He sat alone, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than Elena made in a month. His hands were clasped on the table in front of him, and he was watching her work. Elena's first instinct was to run. Her second was to check on Luca, who was still coloring quietly in his booth. The man's eyes followed her movement. When she got close to Luca, the man stood up and walked over. "Is he all right?" he asked. His voice was deep and calm, with just a hint of an accent. "He's fine," Elena said quickly. "Just tired." The man looked at Luca, who was drawing a picture of a house with stick figures in the windows. "How old is he?" 7. "And you take care of him?" Elena's protective instincts kicked in. "Who's asking?" The man studied her face, someone who understands what it means to protect family. Before Elena could respond, her boss came out of the kitchen. Frank was a good man, but business was business. "Elena, we need to talk." Elena's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. "I'm sorry, hun, but I can't keep you on. You've missed too many shifts, and there's been talk about trouble following you. Frank, please, I need this job." "I'm sorry. Really, I am." Elena felt the world tilt. Without this job, they had nothing. No money for rent, for food, for anything. The man in the suit was still standing there, listening to everything. Elena wanted to disappear into the floor. "I understand," she told Frank. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "Thank you for everything." She gathered up Luca and his coloring supplies. As they headed for the door, the man at table 4 called out, "Excuse me." Elena turned around. The man was holding out several $20 bills. "This should cover the boys' meal, and yours." "We didn't order anything," Elena said. "Consider it a tip for good service." Elena stared at the money. It was more than she'd made all week. but taking it felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. "No, thank you," she said. The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "The offer stands," he said, "if you change your mind." Elena walked Luca to their car, her pride burning in her throat. As they drove away, she saw the man in her rearview mirror, still watching them go. 3 days later, their landlord knocked on the door at 7 in the morning. Elena opened it to find Mr. Kowalski standing there with 2 large men she didn't recognize. "Time's up," he said. "I need you out today." "But the notice said 30 days?" Elena protested. "That was before I heard about the kind of people looking for you. I can't have that trouble in my building." Elena's heart sank. "Please, just give me a few more days. I'm looking for work. I just need—" "Today," Mr. Kowalski repeated. "I'm sorry, Elena. I really am. But I've got other tenants to think about." Elena closed the door and leaned against it. Luca was sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal and pretending not to listen. But she could see the fear in his eyes. They had nowhere to go. Elena had called every shelter in the city, but they were all full. Her car was old and small. They could sleep in it for a night or two, but what then? She started packing their few belongings into garbage bags and boxes. Clothes, Luca's toys, the photo of his mother that sat by his bed. Everything they owned fit into the back of her beat-up Honda. Elena was carrying the last box down the stairs when she heard Mr. Kowalski arguing with someone outside. "I told you they're moving out today. You can't—" "Actually, I think we can." Elena knew that voice. She looked out the window and saw a black car parked in front of the building. The man from the diner was standing next to it, talking to her landlord in a tone that was polite but somehow terrifying. Mr. Kowalski was backing away, his face pale. "Look, I don't want any trouble." "Then don't cause any," the man said. He looked up and saw Elena in the window. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" Elena's mind raced. She could pretend not to be home, but her car was packed with boxes. She could try to leave, but there was something about the man's presence that suggested running wouldn't work. She opened the front door. "What do you want?" "To help," he said simply, "if you'll let me." "Why?" The man looked at Luca, who was peeking out from behind Elena's legs. "Because some things are more important than pride." Elena stared at him. He was offering her a way out, but she didn't know what the price would be. "You're the one who speaks Sicilian," the man said quietly. Before Elena could answer, she heard the soft click of metal behind her. The sound was quiet, but it cut through the morning air like a scream. Elena's blood turned to ice. She knew that sound from movies, from nightmares, from the stories Tony used to tell about the old neighborhood. Someone was pointing a gun at her back. Elena's heart stopped. The click of the gun behind her was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. Time slowed down, like honey dripping from a spoon. "Don't move," a rough voice said from behind her. Elena felt Luca press against her legs, his small body trembling. She wanted to turn around to shield him, but the voice had said not to move. The man from the diner, she still didn't know his name, went perfectly still. His dark eyes locked onto something over Elena's shoulder, and his whole body changed. The polite stranger disappeared, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Let her go," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "This is between you and me." "I don't think so," the voice behind Elena said. She could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne. "See, Mr. High and Mighty, you cost us some business the other night. Now we're going to cost you something back." Elena's mind was spinning. This was about the fight in the alley. These men knew the stranger, and now she and Luca were caught in the middle. "Please," Elena whispered. "My nephew. He's just a little boy." "Shut up," the gunman said. That was a mistake. The stranger's eyes went black with rage. Elena had never seen anything like it. One second he was standing there talking, the next he was moving like lightning. Elena heard the gun go off, but the bullet went wide. The stranger had grabbed the gunman's wrist and twisted it away. The gun clattered across the concrete. Elena spun around and grabbed Luca, pulling him against her chest. She saw the gunman, young, maybe 20, with scared eyes and shaking hands. The stranger had him pinned against the building wall. "If you ever," the stranger said, his voice deadly quiet, "point a gun at a child again, I will end you. Do you understand me?" The young man nodded frantically. "Good." The stranger let him go. "Now run." The gunman stumbled away, leaving his weapon behind. Elena watched him disappear around the corner, her whole body shaking. The stranger picked up the gun and checked it, then tucked it inside his jacket like he'd done it 1,000 times before. When he looked at Elena, his expression was gentle again. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Elena shook her head. She couldn't speak. Luca was crying silently into her shoulder, his little hands fisted in her shirt. "We need to get you somewhere safe," the stranger said. "Both of you." "I don't understand," Elena managed to say. "What's happening? Who are you?" The stranger was quiet for a moment. Around them, the neighborhood was waking up. People were looking out windows, but no one came outside. Elena realized they were all afraid. "My name is Matteo DeLuca," the stranger said, "and you're in danger because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time." Elena knew that name. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Matteo DeLuca was the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about, the kind of man who made problems disappear. "You're—" she couldn't say it out loud. "I'm someone who can keep you safe," Matteo said, "if you'll let me." Elena looked at Luca, who had stopped crying but was still clinging to her. She looked at their belongings piled in her car, everything they owned in garbage bags and cardboard boxes. She looked at Mr. Kowalski, who was standing across the street now, watching like this was a movie. "What's the price?" she asked. Matteo's expression softened. "There is no price. You helped me without knowing it. You spoke our language, reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Now I help you." "I didn't help you do anything." "You reminded me that not everything in this world is ugly," Matteo said quietly. "Sometimes that's enough." Elena felt tears starting in her eyes. She was so tired of being strong, so tired of fighting just to survive another day. But trusting a man like Matteo DeLuca was like jumping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch her. "Please," Matteo said, and she heard something in his voice that surprised her. "Let me help." Luca lifted his head from Elena's shoulder and looked at Matteo. The little boy studied the man's face for a long moment, then nodded once. Elena's last bit of resistance crumbled. If Luca trusted him, maybe she could too. "Okay," she whispered. Matteo's relief was visible. "Good. Rico will drive your car. You'll come with me." Elena looked around and saw another man standing by a second black car. He was younger than Matteo, with kind eyes and careful movements. He nodded to her politely. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "Home," Matteo said simply. Matteo's house wasn't a house. It was a mansion hidden behind tall gates and thick trees. Elena stared out the car window as they drove up the long driveway, her mouth open in shock. "This is where you live?" she asked. "This is where we'll all live," Matteo said, "for now." The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s came out, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing an apron over her dark dress. "Giovanna," Matteo said as they got out of the car. "We have guests." Giovanna looked at Elena and Luca with sharp but kind eyes. "I see," she said. The little one looks hungry. Elena started to protest. They weren't charity cases, but Matteo put a gentle hand on her arm. Giovanna practically raised me, he said quietly. She doesn't mean any offense. Luca was staring at the house with wide eyes. It was 3 stories tall with columns and big windows that sparkled in the sunlight. Elena had cleaned houses like this before, but she'd never imagined living in one. "Come," Giovanna said, holding out her hand to Luca. "Let's see what's in the kitchen." To Elena's surprise, Luca took the older woman's hand. He usually didn't trust strangers, but something about Giovanna seemed to calm him. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. High ceilings, expensive furniture, paintings on the walls that looked like they belonged in museums. Elena felt like she was walking through a movie set. "The guest rooms are upstairs," Matteo said. "You and Luca can have the blue suite. It has 2 bedrooms and a sitting area." "How long?" Elena asked. "How long what? How long can we stay?" Matteo stopped walking and turned to face her. "Until you feel safe enough to leave." "And when will that be?" "I don't know," Matteo said honestly. "The people who threatened you, they're connected to the ones who attacked me. This won't end quickly." Elena felt panic rising in her chest. "What do you mean? How long are we talking about? Days? Weeks?" "I don't know," Matteo repeated. "But you're safe here, both of you." Elena looked around the grand hallway with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. "I can't live like this. This isn't my world." "It can be," Matteo said, "for as long as you need it to be." Before Elena could argue, Luca came running back from the kitchen. His face was brighter than Elena had seen it in months, and he was carrying a chocolate chip cookie bigger than his hand. Giovanna followed behind him, smiling. "He likes my baking," she said to Elena, "and he has good manners. You've raised him well." Elena felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you." "Come," Giovanna said. "Let me show you your rooms." The blue suite was bigger than Elena's entire apartment had been. Luca ran from room to room, touching everything with careful fingers. His bedroom had a bed big enough for 3 kids, a bookshelf full of children's stories, and toys that looked like they'd never been played with. Elena's room was next door, with a bathroom that had a tub big enough to swim in and towels so fluffy she wanted to bury her face in them. "This is too much," she told Matteo, who was standing in the doorway. "It's what I have," he said simply. "But I can't pay for any of this. I don't have money. I don't have a job. I don't have anything to offer you." Matteo was quiet for a moment. "Can you cook?" The question surprised her. "Yes." "Can you speak Sicilian to an old woman who gets lonely?" "Yes." "Can you help a little boy feel at home in a place that's forgotten how to be a what? Home?" Elena looked at Luca, who was sitting on the floor looking through a picture book. "Yes." "Then you have plenty to offer." That evening, Elena sat with Luca in the big kitchen while Giovanna made dinner. The older woman moved around the stove like a dancer, adding pinches of this and splashes of that without measuring anything. "Your nonna taught you to cook?" Giovanna asked in Sicilian. Elena smiled. It had been years since anyone had spoken to her in the old language. "Yes." She said a woman who can't cook can't take care of her family. "Smart woman." Giovanna handed Elena a wooden spoon. "Taste." The sauce was perfect, rich and sweet with just enough spice to make Elena's eyes water in the best way. "It's wonderful," Elena said. "Good. Tomorrow you cook. I want to see what your nonna taught you." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the food. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Matteo came into the kitchen just as Giovanna was putting plates on the table. Elena watched him carefully. Here in his own house, he seemed different. Less dangerous, more tired. "Smells like heaven," he told Giovanna. "Sit. the older woman commanded. "All of you. Family eats together." Elena started to say they weren't family, but Luca was already climbing into a chair. Matteo sat across from them, and for a moment they looked like any normal family having dinner together. Except nothing about this was normal. "Tell me about the men who threatened you," Matteo said after they'd started eating. Elena's appetite disappeared. "They said my brother owed them money." "How much?" "They didn't say exactly, but it sounded like a lot." Matteo nodded slowly. "Tony Romano was your brother?" Elena was surprised he knew the name. "Yes." "He borrowed from the Messinas," Matteo said quietly. "Vittorio Messina doesn't forgive debts." The name made Elena's blood run cold. Even she knew about the Messina family. They were the kind of people who hurt innocents to make their point. "How much?" she asked. 50,000. Elena's fork clattered onto her plate. $50,000? Plus interest, probably closer to 80 now. Elena couldn't breathe. $80,000 might as well have been 80 million. She'd never see that kind of money in her entire life. "But that's not your debt," Matteo continued, "and they know it. They're using you to get to me." "Why?" Matteo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Because they know I won't let innocent people get hurt, especially not a woman and child." Elena looked at Luca, who was eating his pasta and pretending not to listen, but she could see the tension in his small shoulders. "So this is my fault," she said. "If I hadn't been in that alley—" "No." Matteo's voice was firm. "This is not your fault. This is what happens when evil people think they can use fear to get what they want." "What do they want?" Matteo met her, eyes across the table. "They want me to back down from business that's rightfully mine. They think threatening you will make me weak." "Will it?" Elena asked quietly. Matteo's smile was cold and hard. "It will make me very, very angry." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, the situation too impossible. She kept thinking about $80,000, about men with guns, about the way Matteo had moved when Luca was threatened. She got up and walked to the window. The grounds around the house were huge, with gardens and trees and paths that disappeared into darkness. In the distance, she could see the lights of the city, but they felt like they belonged to another world. A soft knock on her door made her jump. "Come in," she said. Matteo stepped inside, still wearing his clothes from dinner. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable. I can't sleep." "I understand. It's a lot to take in." Elena turned back to the window. "Why are you really helping us?" "I told you." "The real reason," Elena interrupted, "men like you don't risk themselves for strangers. Not without a reason." Matteo was quiet for so long that Elena thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I had a daughter once. She would have been about Luca's age now." Elena's heart clenched. "What happened to her?" "She died, along with her mother, because of men like the ones who threatened you today." Elena turned around to face him. In the dim light from the window, Matteo looked younger and infinitely sadder. "I'm sorry," she said. "I couldn't save them," Matteo continued, "but maybe I can save you." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes. "We're not your family to save." "No," Matteo said quietly, "but you could be." The words hung in the air between them. Elena didn't know what to say, what to think, what to feel. This man was offering her safety, protection, a home. But he was also dangerous, powerful, connected to a world she didn't understand. "I don't know how to be in your world," she said finally. "You don't have to be in my world," Matteo said. "I can be in yours." Before Elena could ask what that meant, they heard a sound from Luca's room. not crying, but a small, scared noise that made Elena's heart race. She hurried to his bedroom and found him sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear. "Bad dream?" she asked in Sicilian, sitting on the edge of the bed. Luca nodded and reached for her. Elena pulled him into her arms, feeling his small body shake. Matteo appeared in the doorway. "Is he all right?" "Just scared," Elena said. "New place, new sounds." To her surprise, Matteo came into the room and sat in the chair by the window. "My daughter used to have nightmares," he said quietly, "about monsters in the dark." Luca looked at him with curious eyes. "You know what I told her?" Matteo continued. "I told her that some monsters are real, but the people who love you are stronger than any monster." Elena felt her throat tighten. Luca was listening intently, his fear starting to fade. "And sometimes," Matteo said, "the people who look like monsters are actually the ones protecting you from the real monsters." Luca studied Matteo's face for a long moment. Then, to Elena's amazement, he held out his arms. Matteo looked shocked, but he moved closer and let Luca hug him. The little boy whispered something in his ear. Elena couldn't hear what, but whatever it was made Matteo's eyes fill with tears. "What did he say?" Elena asked when Luca had settled back into bed. "He asked if I was one of the good monsters," Matteo said quietly. "What did you tell him?" Matteo looked at Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I told him I was trying to be." The next few days fell into a strange routine. Elena would wake up in the most beautiful room she'd ever slept in, help Giovanna with breakfast, and watch Luca explore his new temporary home. Rico, Matteo's right-hand man, had gentle eyes and a quiet way of making sure Elena felt safe. He taught Luca card tricks and helped Elena understand the security system that protected the house. "Mr. DeLuca, he's a good man," Rico told her one afternoon while Luca napped. "People don't always see that, but it's true." "He's in a dangerous business," Elena said. "Yes, but he has honor. He protects people who can't protect themselves." Elena was starting to see that for herself. Matteo was careful around Luca, patient with Elena's questions, and respectful of the fact that she was scared and out of her depth. But she also saw the phone calls he took in his office, the way his men looked at him with fear and respect, the guns hidden under jackets and in drawers throughout the house. On Thursday evening, Elena was helping Giovanna with dinner when Matteo came into the kitchen looking grim. "We need to talk," he said to Elena. Elena's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "The Messinas made another move. They're asking questions about you around the neighborhood, about Luca." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of questions?" "Where he goes to school, what he looks like, who his friends are." Elena grabbed the counter for support. "They're going to hurt him." "No," Matteo said firmly. "They're not, but we need to be more careful." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't leave the grounds without Rico or me. It means Luca stays close to the house. It means we wait for them to make their next move." Elena felt like the walls were closing in. "For how long?" "I don't know," Matteo said honestly. That night, Elena couldn't eat dinner. She pushed her food around on her plate while Luca and Matteo talked about the books in the library. Her nephew was starting to smile more, starting to relax, and now she had to tell him they were prisoners again. "I need some air," she said, standing up abruptly. "Elena," Matteo started, "just for a few minutes, please." Matteo nodded reluctantly. "Stay close to the house." Elena stepped out onto the back patio and breathed in the cool evening air. The gardens were beautiful in the fading light, but they felt like bars on a very pretty cage. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Matteo come up behind her until he spoke. "I know this is hard," he said. "Do you?" Elena turned to face him. "Do you know what it's like to feel helpless? To have no control over your own life?" Yes, Matteo said quietly. I do. When? Matteo leaned against the railing beside her. When my wife and daughter were killed. When I realized that all my power, all my money, all my men, none of it was enough to save the people I loved most. Elena felt her anger deflate. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... You're angry. You have the right to be angry. But don't be angry at me for trying to protect you. I'm not used to being protected, Elena said. I'm used to doing the protecting. You can still protect Luca, Matteo said, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. Elena looked through the window at Luca, who was showing Giovanna something in his coloring book. For the first time in 2 years, he looked like a normal little boy. What if I like it here? She asked quietly. What do you mean? What if I get used to this? To feeling safe, to not worrying about money, to having help? What happens when it's time to leave? Matteo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Maybe you won't have to leave. What are you saying? I'm saying that this house has been empty for too long, that Giovanna has been lonely, that I've forgotten what it feels like to have a family. Elena's heart started beating faster. Matteo, I'm not asking you to marry me, he said quickly. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe this is where you and Luca belong. Elena stared at him. In your world? In my home, Matteo corrected. There's a difference. Before Elena could respond, Rico appeared in the doorway. Boss, he said urgently, we have a problem. Matteo's expression went cold and hard. What kind of problem? The kind that's about to come through the front gate. The alarm system screamed through the house like a wounded animal. Elena's blood turned to ice as she heard the sound, sharp, urgent, terrifying. Where's Luca? Matteo shouted over the noise. Kitchen with Giovanna. Rico answered, already moving toward the front of the house. Elena ran inside, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found Luca pressed against Giovanna's side, his eyes wide with fear. The older woman was calm but alert, one hand on Luca's shoulder, the other holding a rolling pin like a weapon. What's happening? Elena gasped. Someone's trying to get in, Giovanna said simply. They won't succeed. Through the kitchen window, Elena could see car headlights moving up the driveway. Too many cars. Too many lights. Matteo burst into the kitchen, his face grim. We need to move. Now. Where? Elena asked, scooping Luca into her arms. Safe room, downstairs. Elena had never seen the safe room. She'd known it existed. Rico had mentioned it when he'd shown her around the house, but she'd hoped she'd never need to see it. Matteo led them through the house quickly, past expensive furniture and beautiful paintings that now seemed meaningless. He pressed his hand against a hidden panel in the wall, and a door Elena had never noticed swung open. The stairs going down were narrow and dark. Elena held Luca tightly as they descended into what felt like a bunker. The room at the bottom was bigger than she'd expected, with thick walls, monitors showing security cameras, and supplies that could last for days. Stay here, Matteo said, his hand on Elena's arm. No matter what you hear, stay here until Rico or I come for you. What about you? Elena asked. I'm going to end this. Elena saw the change in him then. The gentle man who had comforted Luca after his nightmare was gone, replaced by someone cold and dangerous. This was the man people feared, the man who made problems disappear. Be careful, Elena whispered. Something flickered in Matteo's dark eyes. I have something to come back to now. He left them in the safe room with Giovanna, who immediately began making coffee like they were having a normal evening. Elena sat on the couch with Luca on her lap, both of them staring at the monitors that showed different views of the house and grounds. On screen, Elena could see men in dark clothes moving around the property. Too many to count. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly where they were going. "Who are they?" Elena asked. "Messina's boys," Giovanna said calmly. "Stupid boys who don't know what they're walking into." "What do you mean?" Giovanna smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "This house has been protecting the DeLuca family for 3 generations. Those boys think they can just walk in and take what they want." On the monitors, Elena watched Matteo and his men take positions around the house. They moved like shadows, appearing and disappearing behind trees and walls. Elena counted at least 10 of Matteo's people, but she knew there were probably more she couldn't see. The first gunshot made Elena jump and hold Luca tighter. Then came more shots, like fireworks on the 4th of July. Luca buried his face in Elena's shoulder, and she whispered to him in Sicilian, telling him everything would be okay. But Elena wasn't sure anything would be okay ever again. The fighting lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Elena watched the monitors, trying to spot Matteo among the moving figures. Every time she saw someone fall, her heart stopped until she could be sure it wasn't him. Then suddenly it was quiet. Elena stared at the screens, afraid to breathe. Had they won? Had they lost? Were Matteo and his men okay? "How do we know when it's safe?" she asked Giovanna. "When they come for us," the older woman said. "If the wrong people come down those stairs, this room has other ways out." Elena didn't want to think about what that meant. They waited in silence for what felt like forever. Luca had fallen asleep in Elena's arms, exhausted by fear and adrenaline. Elena stroked his hair and tried not to imagine what was happening upstairs. Finally, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Elena's whole body tensed, ready to run if it was the wrong person coming down. The door opened, and Rico appeared. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but he was smiling. "It's over," he said. "Boss wants to see you." Elena carried Luca upstairs, following Rico through the house. Some of the furniture had been overturned, and there were bullet holes in the walls. But the damage was less than Elena had expected. She found Matteo in his office, sitting behind his desk with a bandage around his left arm. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. "Are you hurt?" Elena asked, setting Luca down carefully. The little boy was awake now, but still groggy. "Just a scratch," Matteo said. "Are you okay? Both of you?" "We're fine." Elena looked at the bandage on his arm. "That's not just a scratch." "It's not serious." Elena moved closer and saw that the bandage was already spotted with blood. "You need a doctor." "I need to make sure my family is safe," Matteo said quietly. The word family hit Elena like a punch to the stomach. He was talking about her and Luca. Somehow, without her realizing it, that's what they'd become. "What happened to the men who came here?" she asked. "Some ran away. Some didn't." Elena didn't ask what he meant by that. She didn't want to know. "Will they come back?" "Not those ones," Matteo said, "but Vittorio will send others." Elena felt her heart sink. "So, this isn't over." "No, it's not over." Elena looked at Luca, who was sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the grounds where men had just tried to kill them. His face was pale and serious, older than his 7 years. "I can't do this to him," Elena whispered. "He's just a baby. He shouldn't have to live like this." "No, he shouldn't," Matteo agreed, "and he won't have to. Not for much longer." "What does that mean?" Matteo's expression went cold again. "It means I'm going to end this, once and for all." "How?" "By doing what I should have done weeks ago." Elena didn't like the sound of that. "Matteo, I'm going to kill Vittorio Messina." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena felt cold all over. "You can't," she said. "Why not?" "Because then you'll be just like him. Because violence only leads to more violence. Because Luca has already lost too many people." Matteo stood up slowly. favoring his injured arm. And what's the alternative? Let him keep coming after you? Let him hurt Luca to get to me? There has to be another way. There isn't. Matteo's voice was gentle but final. Some problems can only be solved one way. Elena stared at him, seeing the man she'd started to care about disappearing behind the mask of the killer he'd always been. If you do this, she said quietly, we can't stay. Matteo froze. What? If you kill him, we can't be part of this family anymore. I won't let Luca grow up thinking that's how you solve problems. Elena, I mean it, Elena said, even though the words were breaking her heart. I know you think you're protecting us, but I have to protect him too. From this world, from this violence, from becoming someone who thinks killing is the answer. Matteo stared at her for a long moment. Elena could see the war going on behind his eyes, between the man who wanted to protect them and the man who knew only one way to end threats. So, what do you want me to do? He asked finally. Let him win? I want you to find a way that doesn't involve murder. There is no other way. Then we'll leave, Elena said, the words cutting her throat like glass. Tomorrow, we'll disappear, change our names, start over somewhere else. He'll find you. Maybe. But at least Luca won't watch the man he's starting to see as a father turn into a killer. The word father hit Matteo like a physical blow. Elena saw him flinch, saw the pain in his eyes. He sees me as a father? Matteo asked quietly. Elena looked at Luca, who was watching them both with worried eyes. He drew a picture yesterday of the three of us standing in front of this house. He labeled it, My Family. Matteo closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with tears. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am, he said. Yes, you do, Elena said softly. I've seen you with him. I've seen you with me. You know how to be gentle. You know how to be kind. You know how to love. Love doesn't stop bullets. No, but maybe it can stop the need for them. That night, Elena couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't because the bed was too soft or the room too quiet. It was because her heart was breaking. She'd meant what she said to Matteo. If he killed Vittorio Messina, she would take Luca and leave. She couldn't let the little boy she loved more than her own life grow up thinking violence was normal. But leaving would destroy her. In just a few weeks, she'd fallen in love with this strange, dangerous man who made her feel safe and protected and cherished. She'd fallen in love with the way he looked at Luca, the way he listened to Giovanna's stories, the way he tried so hard to be good despite everything in his world pushing him toward darkness, and Luca was happy here. For the first time since his mother died, he was smiling, laughing, acting like a normal little boy. How could she take that away from him? But how could she let him stay in a world where people solve problems with guns? Elena was sitting by the window, wrestling with impossible choices, when she heard a soft knock on her door. Come in, she said. Matteo stepped inside, still wearing his clothes from earlier. The bandage on his arm had been changed, and he looked tired but determined. I've been thinking, he said. About what? About what you said. About finding another way. Elena's heart jumped. And? I think I might have an idea, but I'll need your help. What kind of help? Matteo moved closer, and Elena could see the hope and fear warring in his eyes. I need you to trust me, he said. One more time. Elena studied his face, looking for any sign that he was just telling her what she wanted to hear. But all she saw was sincerity and something that might have been love. What's your idea? She asked. Vittorio Messina is an old-fashioned man. He believes in certain codes, certain traditions. If I challenge him the right way, in front of the right people, he'll have to respond with honor instead of violence. What does that mean? It means I call for a sit-down, a meeting with the other families where we settle this like civilized people instead of animals. Elena felt a flutter of hope. Would he agree to that? If I do it right, he'll have to. If he refuses, he'll look weak in front of people whose respect he needs. And you think he'll honor whatever decision they make? He'll have to. Breaking a decision made by the families would mean war with everyone, not just me. Elena wanted to believe it could be that simple. What's the catch? The catch is that I'll have to give him something he wants, and I'll have to risk everything I have. What does he want? Matteo was quiet for a moment. Territory, business, things I've spent years building. Would you really give that up? For you and Luca? Yes. Elena felt tears start in her eyes. Matteo, I've been thinking about what you said, he continued, about the kind of man Luca needs me to be, about the kind of man I want to be. And maybe it's time for me to stop being the king of a kingdom built on fear. Maybe it's time to build something else. What would you build instead? A life, Matteo said simply, with you, with him, something normal, something good. Elena stood up and moved closer to him. You'd really walk away from all of this? I'd walk away from anything to keep you safe. Both of you. Elena reached out and touched the bandage on his arm, thinking about how he'd been hurt protecting them. When would this sit-down happen? She asked. Soon? Within days. And if it doesn't work? If he doesn't honor the decision? Matteo's expression grew dark. Then I'll do what I have to do. But at least I'll have tried your way first. Elena looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He would try to solve this peacefully, for her, for Luca. But if peaceful didn't work, he would still do whatever was necessary to protect them. Maybe that was enough. Maybe knowing he would try was all she could ask for. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Okay, I trust you. We'll stay, and we'll see if your plan works. Matteo's relief was visible. He reached up and touched her face with his good hand, his thumb brushing across her cheek. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, Elena said. Thank me when this is all over and we're all still alive. We will be, Matteo said with certainty. All of us, I promise. Elena wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him, because the alternative was too terrible to think about. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Elena was having breakfast with Luca when Rico came into the kitchen, his face grim. Boss needs to see you, he told Elena. Both of you. Elena's stomach dropped. What happened? Just come, please. They found Matteo in his office, standing by the window with his phone in his hand. When he turned to face them, Elena could see the rage burning in his eyes. What is it? She asked. Vittorio Messina just made his move, Matteo said quietly. What kind of move? Matteo looked at Luca, then back at Elena. He's put a contract out, $50,000 to anyone who brings him the boy. Elena felt the world tilt. What does that mean? It means every criminal in the city is now hunting for Luca. Elena grabbed Luca and pulled him close, her hands shaking. Why? Why would he do that? Because he knows it's the one thing that will make me do something stupid, Matteo said. He's trying to force my hand. Is it working? Matteo's smile was cold and terrible. Yes, it's working. Elena looked at Luca, who was staring up at her with confused, frightened eyes. The little boy didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel the fear in the room. So what do we do? Elena asked. We do what I should have done from the beginning, Matteo said. We end this, tonight. Elena felt her last hope crumble. You're going to kill him. I'm going to protect my family. Matteo, please. He put a price on a 7-year-old boy's head. Matteo said, his voice deadly quiet. He made this about Luca. Now it's about survival. Elena knew he was right. She hated it, but she knew it. As long as Vittorio Messina was alive, Luca would never be safe. "What can I do?" she asked. "Stay here. Keep him safe. Trust me to come home." Elena stared at this man she'd grown to love, knowing he was about to walk into darkness to protect them. "What if you don't come home?" she whispered. "Then Rico will take care of you, both of you. I've made arrangements." "That's not what I meant." Matteo moved closer and cupped her face in his hands. "I will come home," he said firmly. "I have too much to live for now." Elena stood on her toes and kissed him, tasting fear and determination and love on his lips. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. "I love you too," he said. "Both of you. That's why I have to do this." Elena watched him walk away, taking her heart with him into the darkness. All she could do now was wait and pray that love would be stronger than violence, that somehow they would all survive the night. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Elena sat in the living room with Luca, trying to read him stories while her heart hammered against her ribs. Every car that passed outside made her jump. Every creak of the house made her hold her breath. Giovanna brought them dinner, but Elena couldn't eat. The food tasted like sawdust in her mouth. All she could think about was Matteo out there somewhere, walking into danger because of them. "Where did he go?" Luca asked quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken all day. Elena was so surprised to hear his voice that she almost dropped the book. "He went to take care of some business, baby." "Bad business?" Elena looked into Luca's dark eyes and saw an old soul looking back at her. This little boy had seen too much, lost too much. He deserved honesty, even if it hurt. "Yes," she said softly. "Bad business." "Is he going to get hurt?" Elena's throat closed up. "I don't know." Luca climbed into her lap and wrapped his arms around her neck. "I don't want him to get hurt," he whispered. "Neither do I, baby. Neither do I." They sat together in the quiet house, listening to nothing and waiting for everything to change. Rico checked on them every hour, his face grim but reassuring. Giovanna hummed old songs in the kitchen, the same lullabies Elena's grandmother had sung to her years ago. At midnight, Elena put Luca to bed. He didn't want to let go of her hand, afraid that if he fell asleep, everyone he cared about would disappear. "I'll stay right here," Elena promised, settling into the chair by his bed. "I won't leave." "Promise?" "Promise." Elena watched Luca's breathing slow and deepen, but she couldn't relax. The house felt too quiet, too empty without Matteo's presence. She found herself straining to hear his car in the driveway, his footsteps on the stairs. At 2 a.m, her phone buzzed. Elena's heart stopped when she saw Rico's name on the screen. "Is he okay?" she whispered into the phone. "He's alive," Rico said, "but he's hurt. We're bringing him home now." Elena's legs went weak. "How hurt?" "He needs a doctor, but he's conscious. He's asking for you." Elena closed her eyes and tried not to cry. "Is it over?" "It's over." 20 minutes later, Elena heard cars in the driveway. She ran downstairs and threw open the front door just as Rico helped Matteo out of the passenger seat. Matteo was pale and moving carefully, but he was walking. When he saw Elena, he smiled despite the blood on his shirt and the exhaustion in his eyes. "I told you I'd come home," he said. Elena ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist as carefully as she could. He felt solid and warm and alive. "What happened?" she asked. "Later," Matteo said. "Right now I just want to hold you." They made it to the living room before Matteo's strength gave out. Elena helped him sit on the couch while Giovanna fussed over his injuries. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, a small, nervous man who asked no questions and worked quickly. 3 stitches, the doctor said when he was finished. The bullet just grazed your ribs. You were lucky. After the doctor left, Elena curled up next to Matteo on the couch, afraid to let him out of her sight. "Tell me what happened," she said. Matteo was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was tired but peaceful. "I went to Vittorio's warehouse. Just me and Rico." "That was stupid," Elena said. "Probably, but it was also necessary." "Why?" "Because I needed to look him in the eye when I told him it was over." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Is he dead?" "Yes." Elena closed her eyes. She'd known it would come to this, but hearing it still hurt. "I'm sorry," Matteo said quietly. "I know you hoped there would be another way. Did you try? The sit down? The peaceful solution?" "I tried." He laughed at me. Said the only negotiation he was interested in was watching me bury my new family. Elena's blood went cold. "He said that?" "He said that, and then he pulled a gun." "So it was self-defense?" "It was survival," Matteo said. "His or mine. I chose mine." Elena understood. She hated it, but she understood. Some people couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be bargained with. Sometimes the only choice was between being a victim and being a survivor. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we live," Matteo said simply. "The contract on Luca is dead with Vittorio. The threat to you is over. We're free." "Free to do what?" Matteo turned to look at her, his dark eyes soft with love and hope. "Free to be a family." Elena felt tears start in her eyes. "Is that what you want?" "It's all I want," Matteo said. "You, Luca, this house full of laughter instead of silence. A normal life." "What about your business? Your empire?" "I'm stepping back. Rico can handle the day-to-day operations. I'll still be involved, but differently. More like a consultant than a king." Elena stared at him. "You'd really do that? Give up all that power?" "Elena, what good is power if you're alone? What good is an empire if there's no one to share it with? But this is who you are. This is your world." "No," Matteo said firmly. "This is what I did. You and Luca are who I am." Elena leaned against his chest, careful not to hurt his injured ribs. She could hear his heart beating steady and strong under her ear. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Both of you. Even though I made you promise not to kill anyone?" Matteo's laugh was soft and tired, especially because of that. "You made me remember who I wanted to be instead of who I had to be." Elena tilted her head up to look at him. "And who did you want to be?" "A good man, a father, a husband if you'll have me." Elena's breath caught. "Matteo." "I'm not asking you to answer now," he said quickly. "I know this is all crazy and fast and complicated. I just want you to know that's what I'm hoping for. A real family, a real life." Elena thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The threats, the violence, the fear, but also the tenderness, the protection, the love that had grown between them like a flower in concrete. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said finally. Matteo's smile was brighter than the sunrise. "I will. Every day until you say yes." "What makes you think I'll say yes?" "Because you love me. And because Luca needs a father who will protect him and teach him and love him no matter what." Elena knew he was right. She could see it in the way Luca looked at Matteo, the way the little boy had started to trust again, to smile again, to hope again. "He drew another picture yesterday," she said. "What was it this time?" "The 3 of us at his school play. You were wearing a suit, I was wearing a dress, and he was on stage in a costume. A normal family doing normal things? Exactly. Matteo closed his eyes, and Elena could see the emotion on his face. I want that. I want to go to school plays and help with homework and teach him to ride a bike. You can have all of that. We all can. They sat together in the quiet house as dawn crept across the sky. Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind of deep, bone-deep peace that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged. Are you sure about this? She asked one more time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 6 months later, Elena woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of laughter from the kitchen. She smiled before she even opened her eyes. It was Saturday morning, which meant Matteo was making his famous chocolate chip pancakes while Luca helped by stealing chocolate chips from the bag. Elena got dressed and padded downstairs in her bare feet, following the sound of her family. She found Matteo at the stove, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, his hair messy from sleep. Luca was sitting on the counter next to him, chattering away about his upcoming school play. And then the dragon comes out, but he's not really scary because Tommy's mom made the costume and it looks more like a big green dog. Luca was saying, "A dragon dog," Matteo said seriously. "That's the most dangerous kind." "That's what I told Sarah, but she said dragons aren't real anyway, so it doesn't matter." "Sarah doesn't know what she's talking about," Elena said, announcing her presence. "Dragons are definitely real." Luca grinned at her. "See? I told you Elena would know." Matteo turned from the stove and kissed Elena good morning. He tasted like coffee and chocolate and home. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Perfect," Elena said. And she meant it. The last 6 months had been like living in a dream. Matteo had kept his promise to step back from the dangerous parts of his business. He still worked, but now it was mostly legitimate enterprises, restaurants, real estate, investments. He came home every night for dinner, helped Luca with his homework, and tucked him into bed with stories about brave knights and clever princesses. Elena had started working again too, managing one of Matteo's restaurants. It felt good to be useful, to contribute, to have her own purpose beyond just being protected. But the best part was watching Luca bloom. The quiet, scared little boy had disappeared, replaced by a happy, talkative 7-year-old who brought home art projects and made friends and asked a million questions about everything. "Elena," Luca said now, swinging his legs from his perch on the counter, "Matteo has something to ask you." Elena looked between them suspiciously. "What kind of something?" Matteo and Luca exchanged a look that was pure mischief. "The kind of something that requires pancakes first," Matteo said. "And orange juice," Luca added. "Don't forget the orange juice." Elena laughed. "Okay, but I'm going to be suspicious of every bite." They ate breakfast on the back patio, surrounded by Giovanna's flower gardens. The older woman had become like a grandmother to Luca, teaching him to cook and telling him stories about the old country. She joined them for breakfast, bringing fresh fruit and her usual supply of gentle scolding. "That boy needs a haircut," she told Elena, ruffling Luca's dark curls. "I like it long," Luca protested. "It makes me look like a rock star." "It makes you look like you don't own a comb," Giovanna said, but she was smiling. After breakfast, Matteo suggested a walk in the gardens. Elena noticed that Luca stayed close, practically bouncing with excitement about something. "Okay," Elena said when they reached the rose garden. "What's going on? You two have been acting strange all morning." Matteo stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was nervous but determined. "Elena," he said, "6 months ago you told me to ask you again." Elena's heart started beating faster. "Ask me what?" Instead of answering, Matteo dropped to one knee. Elena's hands flew to her mouth as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Elena Romano," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my family for the rest of our lives?" Elena stared at him, this dangerous, gentle, loving man who had changed her entire world. She thought about everything they'd been through together, everything they'd overcome, everything they'd built. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." Matteo's relief was visible as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was perfect, simple, and elegant, just like she would have chosen for herself. Luca cheered and threw his arms around both of them. "Now we're really a family," he said. "We were always a family," Elena said, hugging them both tight. "Now we just have a piece of paper to prove it." "And a big party," Lucas said hopefully. "With cake?" "Definitely cake," Matteo promised. They walked back to the house hand in hand, all three of them together. Elena looked at her ring sparkling in the sunlight and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A year ago, she'd been alone and scared and barely surviving. Now she was engaged to a man who loved her, raising a little boy who was happy and healthy, living in a house filled with warmth and laughter. "No second thoughts?" Matteo asked quietly as they reached the patio. Elena looked at him, this man who had saved her and let her save him in return. "None," she said firmly. "This is exactly where I belong." That evening, they celebrated with Giovanna and Rico and the rest of their chosen family. Elena watched Luca tell everyone about the proposal, his face bright with joy. She watched Matteo laugh at something Rico said, his whole body relaxed and peaceful. This was what happiness looked like, Elena realized, not the dramatic, passionate love of movies, but the quiet, steady love of real life. The love that showed up every day, that chose commitment over convenience, that built something lasting from something broken. Later, after Luca was in bed and the house was quiet, Elena and Matteo sat together on their porch swing, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "Do you ever miss it?" Elena asked. "The old life?" "Never," Matteo said without hesitation. "This is so much better." Even when Luca's being a pain about homework, especially then. Elena laughed and settled more comfortably against his side. "What do you think our life will look like in 10 years? Luca will be 17 and thinking he knows everything. We'll be embarrassing him in front of his girlfriends. Giovanna will be spoiling our other children rotten." "Other children?" Elena looked up at him in surprise. "Is that okay? I mean, if you want them. If we're blessed with them." Elena thought about little dark-haired babies with Matteo's eyes and her stubborn streak. "I think Luca would like being a big brother." "I think he would too." They swung gently in the evening breeze, planning their future and savoring their present. Elena's engagement ring caught the porch light, a symbol of promises made and promises kept. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For saving us. For letting us save you. For becoming the man Luca needed you to be. Thank you for seeing that man in me when I couldn't see him myself." Elena turned her head to kiss him, tasting love and hope and forever on his lips. In the distance, she could hear the city going about its business, but it felt like it belonged to another world. This was her world now, this house, this man, this little boy who called them both family. This life they'd built from the ashes of their old lives. It was exactly what she'd never dared to dream of. It was home. Elena adjusted her veil one more time and looked at herself in the mirror. The wedding dress was simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a flowing skirt that made her feel like a princess. Giovanna had done her hair in an intricate updo with small white flowers woven through the dark curls. "Beautiful," Giovanna said, stepping back to admire her work. "Matteo won't be able to speak when he sees you." Elena smiled nervously. "I can't believe this is really happening." "Believe it," Giovanna said firmly. "You deserve every bit of happiness coming your way." There was a knock on the bedroom door, and Luca peeked his head in. He was wearing a tiny tuxedo and had his hair slicked back, looking impossibly handsome and grown up. "Elena," he said seriously, "Matteo sent me to tell you that if you change your mind and want to run away, he'll understand. But he really hopes you don't because he already paid for all the flowers." Elena burst out laughing. "Tell Matteo I'm not going anywhere." "Good," Luca said, grinning, "because I really want cake." The wedding was small and perfect. Just family and close friends gathered in the rose garden behind the house. Rico walked Elena down the aisle, while Luca stood next to Matteo as his best man. When Elena saw Matteo waiting for her at the altar, her breath caught. He was wearing a black tuxedo and the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. His eyes were bright with tears and love and joy. "You look perfect," he whispered when she reached him. "So do you," she whispered back. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises of love and loyalty and partnership. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Matteo kissed Elena like she was his whole world, because she was. The reception was a joyful celebration that lasted long into the night. Elena danced with her new husband, with Luca, with Rico, with all the people who had become their family. She ate cake and laughed until her cheeks hurt and felt so full of happiness she thought she might burst. Late that evening, as the last guests were leaving, Elena found Matteo sitting on the porch steps with Luca. The little boy was falling asleep against Matteo's side, exhausted from all the excitement. "Best day ever," Luca mumbled. "The best," Matteo agreed, smoothing down the boy's messy hair. Elena sat down on Matteo's other side and leaned against his shoulder. Her husband. The word still felt new and wonderful. "What are you thinking about?" Matteo asked quietly. "Just all of it. How far we've come. How different everything is now." "Better different?" "So much better." Elena looked at her wedding ring next to her engagement ring, both of them catching the porch light. "I love you, Mr. DeLuca." "I love you too, Mrs. DeLuca." They sat together in the peaceful evening, a family in every way that mattered. Elena thought about the scared waitress she'd been just over a year ago, working long shifts and worrying about money and feeling like she was drowning in responsibility. That woman never could have imagined this life, this love, this happiness that felt solid and real and permanent. But here she was, married to the man she loved, raising the boy who was her heart, surrounded by people who cared about them. It felt like a fairy tale, except it was better than any fairy tale because it was real. Luca fell, asleep completely, and Matteo carried him upstairs to bed. Elena followed, watching her husband tuck their son in and kiss his forehead goodnight. "Sweet dreams, buddy," Matteo whispered. In the hallway, Elena took Matteo's hand and led him to their bedroom. Their bedroom, their life, their future. "No regrets?" she asked, echoing the question he'd asked her months ago. "Only one," Matteo said. Elena's heart skipped. "What?" "I regret that it took so long to find you." Elena smiled and pulled him close, kissing him with all the love in her heart. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, but inside their home, everything was exactly as it should be. A man who'd learned that love was stronger than fear. A woman who'd learned that sometimes the best things came from the most unexpected places. A little boy who'd found his voice and his family and his happy ending. They'd all been broken when they found each other. But together they'd become something beautiful and whole and unbreakable. They'd become a family, and they'd become home.